you can do simple cartoon shading. We have introduced another useful operator in the latest version of Magma, and it's called Mercs. It's basically a switch node. So what we want to do here is, right now we are setting the color and the emission based on a blending, a soft blending. Instead of doing the soft blending, let's go with this vector dot and go to a logic and say I want a mux. I'll grab this connection and put it in the last input. The mux really requires connected nodes here, so I'll have to create some colors, and I have to define how many inputs I want. You can enter an arbitrary number and you're going to get that number of sockets. If I say 10, it's going to create 10 inputs. If I say 100, we'll have a really tall node. So let's say that we want 5 sockets. 4 of those are the inputs from 0 to 3, and the last one is the control socket. So I want to multiply this one by 4 as a float. And then this should be converted to an integer, because this is expecting integer between 0 and 3. So since this is going between 0 and 1, multiplied by 4, we'll be doing kind of that. So we say convert true integer, out ci, this is good. And this is my control, and then I go with this into the color, and I go into the emission. But I need now some colors there. So in this mux, I'm going to say my shadow color, when the dot product is 0, is going to be shift 0, which is black. Then the next shade will be shift 3, which is blue. Shift 4 is cyan, and shift 7 is white. And now I got my banding and cartoon-like shading. I can go and adjust those colors to look a little bit better and more like you want them. But in general, this is a way to actually, you can go and add any number of sockets, multiply by the corresponding number here, and then you're going to get that banding. And potentially you can even create an outline by just measuring whether the normal vector is in the plane of the camera or not, and draw a black outline there for ink, and you can do non-photorealistic rendering. In fact, that's what I'm going to show you next. I will load a scene which contains, again, the Stanford bunny, and the Stanford bunny was set up with cartoon shading like this. I just wish Maya would open a little bit faster, but we have this cartoon shading setup, and in this cartoon shading setup, the bunny was already set up to be shaded as with that shading, but I did something else on top of that. As you can see, there is a lot of jittering happening here. What I did was I added to that Magma that we are using to do the whole shading and outline and so on, an additional operation. It will open now. There is an output velocity, and this velocity is being set to diagonal vector in camera space. So I can convert this vector, which is 100, 100, to camera space, and then I multiply it by a noise in order to get a variation over time. And I'm rendering my bunny with jittered motion blur, which creates all those samples, and it looks like it was hand-drawn with some pastels or whatever, or charcoal and so on. It has the black outline, and it has the banded shading inside. I have a similar example where I did pretty much the same effect, but I didn't enable the jittered motion blur. In that case, I used the regular motion blur, so it actually gets various bands that mix together. I call it water paint. It looks more like some form of painting. And I used a lot more particles in this one, so it takes a little bit longer. I think it's about 6 million. And evaluating textures in Maya is relatively slow, so evaluating textures on 6 million particles can take like 10 seconds or something. So this is another non-photorealistic rendering of the bunny with my own shading, and you can see the 2 passes of motion blur that I used overlaid on each other, like somebody did 2 strokes there, and it's a little bit more hand-drawn. Of course, you can then play with the settings of your noise vector. You can create a horizontal vector in camera space and just jitter it horizontally in order to smear it and so on. But it shows that you can use Magma with Krakatoa to actually shift particles around as if they were pixels and create new effects